Hey everybody, it's Mythic. Welcome back to My PCT So Far Part 4. Day 14 was August 10th. I started out at White Pass, trail mile 2296.1. This was the beginning of my solo adventure because Blue Magic had to go back to work. I was bummed, I was going to miss her, but I was also excited to see what I could do on my own. Before I left home, I had been watching The Hungry Hiker, and she had a recipe for dehydrated spaghetti that I made at home and brought with me. So I had lunch at Snow Lake, which was a beautiful spot off the trail, and I made the spaghetti, and it was delicious. Later on that day, I crossed the Bumping River, and there was no bridge. I crossed over the log with dry feet, and I was pretty proud of myself. Later on that night, I found an unofficial campsite based on a far out comment, and it was lovely. I shared it with one other person. I did 18 miles that day. Day 15 at trail mile 2314.1 started out with a beautiful sunrise. As I was hiking along, I was seeing more views of Mount Rainier, or the indigenous name for that is Tahoma, the Mother of Waters. It was so beautiful that it slowed me down. I was taking a lot of pictures. At lunch that day, I stopped near Dewey Lake, which had a beautiful sandy shoreline and a just stunning blue color to it. And as I was hiking along, I saw a lot of beautiful wildflowers. I love purple, so lupines are some of my favorite wildflowers. As I got closer and closer to Chinook Pass, I started encountering more day hikers, and I could smell their soap or their deodorant, and I'm sure that they could probably smell my lack of soap and lack of deodorant. One of the day hikers said to me, "Well, you sure have all the gear, don't ya?" And I sure did compared to the day hikers. As I got closer to Chinook Pass, I saw a party on horseback that was hitting the trail. I met up with Southern Minnesota guy at the Chinook Pass trailhead. He brought me iced chai and cherries, and I got to have an overnight stay at our Airbnb for a shower and resupply. I did 10.7 miles that day. Day 16 started out at trail mile 2324.8, the Chinook Pass trailhead. Southern Minnesota guy dropped me off. I had a nice second breakfast at Sheep Lake, one of the many Sheep Lake lakes on trail, which I thought was kind of funny. This day had a lot of steep and narrow trails on a slope. I was a little worried about sliding down the slope. As I was hiking along, I took a nice break at Sourdough Gap, which had beautiful views over the mountain ridges. This was the Norse Peak Wilderness, and there was a fire here in 2017, so there was not a whole lot of shade. There were a whole lot of the kind of gray-green tree stumps left over. Some of the logs looked like black lizards because of the charring. I looked across the valley and I could see the Crystal Valley Ski Resort on the other side of the valley. The day was hot, there was no shade, the steep terrain was really slowing me down, and I was missing Blue Magic pretty terribly. I did 13.2 miles that day. Day 17 started at trail mile 2338. It had rained overnight, It was misty and cold, and I was still in a burn zone, so everything looked kind of otherworldly, but there were a lot of plants that were starting to grow back. I took a short break at a water stop and I made some Nor's sides, a rice dish in my Jetboil, and that really hit the spot and helped perk me up. I had a nice lunch at m.y.t.h's cabin. This is a cabin that was built by a snowmobile club, but hikers can stay in here if there's room. And I stretched out my tent and my sleeping bag and I let them dry out in the sun, and that was a great lunch. Helped raise my spirits after the tough day and a half before. This ended up being my longest day on this whole trip. I did 18.9 miles that day. Day 18 started at trail mile 2356.9, an unofficial site that I found on a far out comment. I found a beautiful ridge with views out over the mountain valleys, and it was a gorgeous Sunday morning, and I thought about how God is awesome, and I felt very small but lucky to be there. I was really worried about getting a campsite because of all of them being full yesterday, and as I was getting close to camp that night, I could hear a couple hikers behind me, so I basically jogged for the last 2 miles into camp, and I set up my tent right as soon as I got there to lock down my spot. I did 17 miles that day. Day 19 started off at trail mile 2373.9. After a walk through a clear cut under some power lines, I entered a mossy green forest and walked past a waterfall that had little frogs hanging out next to it. I got to my destination pretty quick for me, Mirror Lake. I met a fellow hiker named Limon from Spain. He reminded me of a friend from back home. He gave me some candy, so trail magic doesn't only just happen at the trailheads. And since I got to camp so early, I had my pick of all of the campsites. I found a waterfall and I lingered there much longer after I had filtered my water because it was so nice and cool with a beautiful view. Later on, as more hikers started showing up at camp, I found a couple of older German hikers who I had seen at m.y.t.h's cabin the day before, and I was enjoying listening to them speak to one another in German. I did 11.4 miles that day. Day 20 started at trail mile 2385.3 at beautiful Mirror Lake. I had really enjoyed staying here. Today was going to be a shorter trail mile day because I was meeting Southern Minnesota guy at Snoqualmie Pass. As I was hiking along, I met a trail maintenance team and I thanked them because their clearing the blow-down trees and building bridges over the rivers really helps make the whole hiking experience so much nicer. As I was hiking along, I could see Interstate 90 in the distance, and I thought I could just hop on that highway and it would take me all the way home to Minnesota. I met up with Southern Minnesota guy at the trailhead north of I-90, and we went into the town of Snoqualmie Pass and had hot dogs at the Squatch Box and root beer from the nearby brewery. I did 9.1 miles that day. Next time, join me for my PCT so far, part 5. Thanks for watching.